Mishnah 6, according to the count that we're using. And actually on the screen it's going to say Mishnah 5, but we're calling it Mishnah 6. This is a continuation from Hillel. So therefore it says, Hu haya omer, he used to say, the previous Mishnah was Hillel. Ein bur yirei chet. A boor, we've heard the word a boor. He doesn't even translate what a boor is, he just calls it a boor. Is someone, a person who is a boor cannot fear sin. V'lo am haaretz chasid. Translates here an unlearned person from am haaretz. Okay, that person cannot be a chassid, translated here as pious. Right, so the word chassid, by the way, which in our times where when we hear the word chassid, generally we think of a Hasidic person, someone wearing the Hasidic garb or following those customs, but really the word chassid itself has a meaning of someone who's is pious, someone who goes beyond the letter of the law, and it's used in Talmudic terms. Our use of the word chassid is relatively recent, this last 200 years or so, maybe a little more than that, 250. But prior to that, the word existed, and it would mean someone who was extra careful in their behavior and someone who went beyond the letter of the law. So here we have two types of people being referred to, neither are able to achieve the ultimate. One is a boor and one is an am haaretz. So a boor, the word boor, is a term that is also used for something that's empty, an empty field. A sedei boor is called it. That's the term for it. So something that is empty is referred to as boor. This person who is empty of any knowledge is ignorant totally. That person is maybe limited. In this case, we're saying that a boor is lower even than an am haaretz. An am haaretz especially doesn't know certain things, but a boor doesn't know anything. He doesn't even know how to conduct himself Rashi says, in business. He can't even do regular stuff. Others, Rabbeinu Yonah points out, not only does he not know Torah, not only does he not know anything about mitzvahs, he doesn't even have derech eretz. This guy doesn't even know how to conduct himself properly in regular human interactions. So that's totally ignorant. I didn't look up the translation or the vocabulary book what the word boor, B-O-O-R, means, but we know we use it for someone who is uncouth, someone who just doesn't conduct themselves in a manner that's expected in society, right? So the Rambam also points out here, a boor is a person who doesn't have wisdom, doesn't have good character traits, right? They're just not a person, and that type of a person is not going to be able to have yirei chet, is not going to be able to have, it doesn't really have fear of sin because they don't even know what it is. They don't understand. They have no concept of of right and wrong really in a full manner. Interestingly, the Tiferes Yisrael points out in terms of this idea of fearing sin, the terminology here is yirei chet, right? Fear of sin. We have another terminology that we use, which is yiras ha'onish, fear of punishment. So a person can sometimes, it's not the highest level, but we sometimes will refrain from doing certain activities that are not right, that are incorrect, because we're afraid of the consequences, right? You might not break a traffic law because you don't want to get a ticket. You might not, you might do it because it's the right thing to do, but many people are following traffic laws because they're afraid of getting a ticket. They're a little less afraid since the speed cameras have gone down, but you're still worried that someone might be, a cop standing at the corner there, right, or something. So that keeps us in line, and different people, different levels, different behaviors will be accordingly depending on what the consequences are. You may or may not do something because of that. And obviously, for us, we're not talking about something that's totally wrong, but for some people whom they might have stolen something or done something else, but they're afraid of the consequence, not necessarily because they don't want to do it. That's a lower level. A higher level would be, I'm afraid of sin, meaning I know this is wrong. I don't want to do something wrong. And so I don't want to do something wrong, therefore I won't do it. It's not because of the punishment. So this terminology here of the boor, that person doesn't have the ability to really be afraid of he can't appreciate what's wrong. And therefore he's not going, if he's not going to do something wrong, it's going to be because he's afraid of the punishment, not because he understands this is the wrong thing to do. The Am Haaretz, on the other hand, that's a person who is ignorant of Torah knowledge, but that person may be very fine character. That person even could be a tzaddik, could be a very righteous person, just don't know how to conduct himself. That person can't be a chassid, cannot be the chassids on the higher level. They can't be on the level where they are going to be going beyond the letter of the law because they don't have that appreciation for it. They don't have, if they didn't study, if they didn't really appreciate what the meaning behind everything is, they don't have the ability to really appreciate the meaning and the depth. So again, Rabbeinu Yonah refers to that person. This person could be very sin-fearing because he's mixing with people. The person has great midos, is very good character, and is, like I say, will follow whatever you tell him. He says, look, don't do this, do that. He's going to follow it. But because he doesn't have that extra level, he can't do what we call the fnim mishuras hadin, and that's to go beyond the letter of the law. He doesn't see that. And in a sense, there a lot of people fit that's what we call I like to call it your average bear, you're from Yogi Bear, right? Your average person, that's it. Someone who's above average, they're taking it to the next level. Another thing that the Tiferes Yisrael points out about this Am Haaretz is that a person, for a person to be able to really achieve a higher level, it's not really just enough to learn. You can learn, but learning is book learning, and therefore you'll read it, you'll know it, but you really won't get it until you're able to see it in action. And that next level, to be a chassid, he says, and to go beyond the letter of the law, that requires to see it in action. You have to be able to see other people behaving that way. You have to go to the people who are the great people and see how do they conduct themselves. And when you're able to see how other people conduct themselves on that higher level, then you can begin to appreciate it. But if all your knowledge is from book learning, then you really don't get the depth and to go beyond it. Another interesting take the Meiri points out is that someone who's let's say not so learned, but they're good in business and even they're honest. They in business, someone can be very exacting in their measurements, right? You get you weigh something, and being perfectly honest, but everything's exact. When it comes to going beyond the letter of the law, the whole point is not to be exact. It's to go beyond it. It's to say, you know what? I don't have to stand and say, I'm only going to do this thing and not a bit more. I'm going to do more than I have to. I'm going to forego certain things because even though I'm allowed to have it, or what could be, again, whether certain behaviors, I may forego certain behaviors that are permitted because, it's still better if I avoid it, or it could be we have a dispute with someone else, right? And you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to be exacting, and I'm not going to say I want exactly everything I deserve. I'm going to say, you know what? For the sake of getting along, I'll forego. Big deal. If you get a little more, it's okay, right? So that's going beyond the letter of the law. And a person who is maybe not so knowledgeable, but is only involved in being exact in their behavior, that person's not going to get to that level. A person who is trying to be more than that person can be more forgiving and foregoing. Okay, and then last line, just before we close, Rabbi Lau he quotes the Kotzker Rebbe that if about a boor, he says if the person was really sin-fearing, then they wouldn't remain a boor because the person would strive to be able to learn and improve themselves. Someone who really fears sin would want to make sure that they don't do anything, and therefore they would learn more in order to be able to make sure that you don't do any of the wrong actions, right? In general, how do we know what we're not supposed to do, whether it be Shabbos, Kashrut, any other law, Pesach's coming up? How do we know what we're supposed to do and not supposed to do? You have to learn it. So if you really want to make sure you know what to do, then you have to learn. And if you're going to learn, then you won't remain a bore. So obviously this person, if they're remaining a bore, must be because they don't care enough about whether the actions that they're doing. So for us, we do not want to remain a bore. We are learning, and we are hopefully taking what we learn and putting it into action as well. Have a great day.